Put a line in the rhyme and a little more rhyme. Put a line in the rhyme and a little more rhyme. Put a line in the 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 line 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 line. Put a line in the rhyme and a little more rhyme. Put a line in the rhyme and a little more rhyme. Put a line in the 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 line 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 line.
I'm here to spill the beans on the big C. Fellas don't think it's real. Us ladies can't even talk about it. And for everyone in between and whatnot, forget about it. We can't even admit we have a big C. But lucky for you, I'm here to help. I know everything that has to do with the big climate crisis. The climate crisis is a result of a highly abundant resource that is constantly extracted. Most people think that this resource is fossil fuels. In reality, it's not. This resource is people. Climate change is something that we'll have to weather together. We have to reclaim our labor in all of its diverse forms that celebrate our different bodies, cultures, and ways of living on planet Earth. It's not about going back. It's about remembering our way forward. It's about working together to solve the big C.
Climate Summit Day 2. So excited to be here. I'm Ashley Brooke Roberts, and I bought these pants for today. Thank you. I haven't sat down yet. I'm not going to try, okay? I have sweatpants ready to go for when this is over. How are we feeling? Excellent. How about we do a little bonding exercise? How do we feel about that? Okay, let's just drop into our bodies, get those shoulders moving back, maybe do a little neck work. Okay, on the count of 3, we're going to say the thing we regret the most from this year, okay? We're getting to know each other. Come on, come on, come on. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Didn't get bangs. Okay. Fun. Very fun. Do we feel closer? Good. I had a haircut last week, and I was going to get bangs because I wanted to express a little chaos in my life, but I went with layers instead. I feel like I'm one haircut away from knowing who I truly am, you know? Like if I can find my look, I will finally be fully accepting. That's not actually the thing I regret the most from this year. I was a little dishonest. I'm going to tell you what it is right now. I was outed at a high school for being a Disney adult. Yeah, I was, first off, not a Disney adult. Second off, was doing a stand-up workshop, brought a Disneyland bottle, okay, water bottle, because I care about the environment. One of the kids saw it and they were like, Ashley, do you go to Disneyland? And I was like, yeah, of course, I'm cool. And they were like, oh my gosh, you're a Disney adult, you're a Disney adult, you're a Disney adult. And then they started telling everybody. And there's just no way to like tell a teenager that you're in charge of that it's like, I'm not a Disney adult. I like to drink and go on roller coasters. I'm fun. Yes, you get it. I just kind of gave like a weird birds and the bees speech. I was like, you'll understand it when you're older. Your parents should have talked to you about this by now. Honestly, I shouldn't be the one breaking it to you. I'm very excited to be here. I just moved to LA. Thank you. I love it. At least that's what I'm telling my friends in New York. I just want them to be jealous, you know? It's fun. There's so many stories here. I'm around so many storytellers, you know, writers in coffee shops, working on screenplays. My landlord always has a riveting tale about why he can't fix my faucet, you know. LA is where stories are born and grow up to be baristas, and I think it's so cool to be here. We've been talking a lot about climate change and scripts and stories, and it's something I think about a lot. There was a study that only 0.6% of scripts from 2016 to 2020 mentioned the term climate change. That is shocking. That's less, statistically less, than the times you giggled while watching The Last of Us, okay? Let that sink in. And I think people are like scared, you know, to take risks with scripts and stuff. But I think we can come together and we can say to Hollywood, hey, Hollywood, Ashley's got a great idea. You love reboots, right? Hollywood loves a reboot, loves a safe bet. Why don't we reboot some movies with a climate change agenda, okay? Yeah. Thank you so much. Butch Cassidy and the Sun-Powered Kid, right? Okay, that's my first pitch. They're hot, they wear leather pants, they rob Chase Bank, okay? Yes, it's the #1 bank that contributes to fossil fuels in this country, Chase Bank. Get your money out of Chase and put it in my pockets. Yes, yes. Okay, that's one. How about E.T. Electric Terrestrial? That could be fun. I would actually like Memento, a reboot of Memento, but instead of clues to his wife's murder, it's fun things to say at parties instead of bringing up your climate anxiety, right? So like your tattoo could be like, instead of saying that like oceans are dying, bring up the fact that you like eating out, you know? Little hints. How about we talk to each other real quick, make a friend next to you, pitch a movie, a reboot. Come up with a reboot. Take a minute. Think of your favorite movie. And then if you have a reboot, shout it out. Say it again. Gone with the Climate Crisis. Give it up for the third row right here. Gone with the Climate Crisis. Love it. If you can come up with some more, you know, come tell me. I'll write them down and you'll get co-writer credit, okay? And on that note, I would like to bring up our moderator for your next panel, actress, director of marketing and comms, and producer of the Hollywood Climate Summit, head of digital and production of Yeah Impact. Please give a warm welcome to Sierra Santana.
All right, thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to bring on these incredible panelists, Fabiana Rodriguez, Dream Hampton, Janelle English, and Reverend Lennox Yearwood. Hi. All right, to get started, Sierra Santana, she, her. I am a Latina female with short, curly, dark hair. I am wearing a 90s vintage silk periwinkle suit. I'm giving Samantha Jones, and I'm wearing white boots.
Hi everyone, I'm Fabiana Rodriguez. she, her, president at the Center for Cultural Power and Interdisciplinary Artists. I have short hair, I'm wearing glasses, and a cream jumpsuit.
Hi, I'm Dream Hampton, filmmaker and writer from Detroit. I'm wearing black and white with neon pink sandals. I have curly hair.
Hello, Janelle English, she, her pronouns. I am a beautiful Black woman wearing a short jean dress, a cream vest, and some beautiful white boots.
And I'm Rev Yearwood, President and CEO of the Hip Hop Caucus, sitting next to some amazing, beautiful Black and brown women up here on the panel. And I am wearing a black hat with red hair underneath it, with a black jacket and pants that my son gave me to wear.
We're so
Good
excited
job,
to be
King.
here. Yeah, great work. I'd love to kick it off to Fabiana Rodriguez to frame this discussion for us.
Great, thank you everyone. Really excited about this panel. So we all know that the world is rapidly changing and there's demands for racial, gender, and economic justice with people on the streets today who are demanding equality. They are demanding an end to an exploitative capitalist culture, right? And it's coming from writers, it's coming from people, it's coming from creatives, it's weaving through writers' rooms and into the studio. And it's truly a time for us not to just imagine incremental change, but to imagine systemic change. I come from a community that has been plagued by pollution and environmental racism since I was born. And just 2 miles away from where I grew up, white communities were protected, while my community ingested toxic diesel fumes that cut my lifespan short, and the lifespan of many of our community members. And I became an artist and an activist precisely to tell stories that were not being heard. And as an artist, I know that stories change people, and people change systems and behaviors. Stories have the capacity to show what is impossible and to make it tangible. Stories move faster than politics. In fact, stories shape our societies. It is why we as human beings have been sitting around fire being informed by stories. And there is a dominant story in this world, and it's a story of extractive capitalism. And that story both accelerates and perpetuates the climate crisis. And we're all very familiar with this dominant story. This dominant story, which is over 500 years old, says that there are certain bodies, certain human bodies, certain animal bodies, certain ocean and forest bodies that can be exploited, that can be harmed for the benefit of a privileged few. And that leads to the concentration of wealth and power. But we have the power to dissolve the dominant narrative, and it's urgent that we do so, because we are the creators of culture, and culture shapes policies. Culture, once again, shapes our imagination around what's possible. Culture shapes societies, and we are working in an industry that is creating global culture. And so it's urgent that we help shape a different story, and we start by doing that by elevating the stories of those who have been most impacted, right? Black people, Indigenous people, disabled people, queer people, trans people, young people, elderly people who have been most impacted by the climate crisis. And as the comedian mentioned earlier, it's criminal that from 2016 to 2020, when you look at all scripted television and film, she mentioned that only 0.8 actually mentioned climate crisis. 2.8% were even related to climate crisis. That's less than 3%. Okay, climate crisis is our global reality. We cannot tell stories without acknowledging the reality that's happening to us, and those who are most impacted, those who are dying. And so we can do that. We have the power to change that, but it's going to take courage. It's going to take for us to create new ways of seeing, for us to prioritize a different kind of voice and to bring forward different kind of voice. So as we talk today, I want you all to remember one thing, and that is that culture is power. And if we are to find our way out of the climate crisis, we have to leverage the power of story, of culture, of art, of the imagination to tell stories of those who have been most impacted, because those who have been most impacted are the ones who have the solutions. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Favi. Stunning, per usual. This question's for Rev. You are considered one of our country's most impactful climate leaders through your work with Hip Hop Caucus. Y'all are standing with frontline communities witnessing the real impacts of the petrochemical industry. Why must we, as storytellers, organize around the climate crisis?
Well, first and foremost, let me just thank the Hollywood Climate Summit for putting on this event and bringing us together.
That's right.
My colleague and dear sister Dream is going to add some pieces from a different perspective, which is very important. But I come to you really why I wanted to be here and why you are important is because I come to you from 20 years of being on the front lines. And being on the front lines, this is not only a climate crisis, it's also a climate crime. And it's a situation when there are those who have a business plan, which means a death sentence for our communities. Our, not just black, not just brown, not just indigenous, but every single one of us across in this room, across Turtle Island, and across the world. And so I come to you that we have been having wins over the past 20 years. We have been doing well in some cases. We've shaped some policy, we shaped legislation, we've grown a movement, we have a youth movement, we have kids who have gone to the Supreme Court, who have sued this country and other countries. We have changed the narrative on some aspects, but I have to tell you that right now, the fossil fuel industry understands to cut two things, and that's communication and that's resources. So I come here as a dispatch from the front lines to tell you that we need your genius now more than ever. There are folks within our movement. I got news this morning of another one of our amazing activists who died literally because there's little care and repair. I am from Louisiana, and I've seen so many who have died because my home state is literally nicknamed Cancer Alley. Many call it Death Alley now. And in that process, what we need is stories. We need to broaden this movement. We need to have folks understand the complexities of what it means to have us transition from fossil fuels to clean energy, what it means to move from petrochemicals, what it means to have petrochemicals and plastics, what it means when people now that we are literally as human beings, we are consuming a credit card's worth of plastic each week. We are finding plastics in the placenta. Our babies are being born with plastics in their bodies. The fossil fuel industry is killing us for their greed. And so we need your narrative, we need your storytelling. So this is what is needed right now. As we are, what is needed from you is that you have to somehow on an industry that was actually built by the fossil fuel industry to control the narrative. Hollywood was built on that from the beginning. You now have to come together as humans, black, white, brown, red, male, female, straight, gay, theist, atheist, humans, in a way that allows for us to survive. If you do not use your gift that came from wherever it came from, your mom, your dad, your DNA, whatever you think it came from, but somehow you have this ability to write, to filmmake, to show run, to work in the academy, or not work in the academy, to be wherever you have to be, to use your genius. We need it now because people think that the climate movement is a particularly white-only movement based in America.
That's right.
And that's a lie.
That's right.
It is a movement that impacts all of us in this world. And so we need you to do stories that are funny and have love and have sex appeal, have drama. We need you to do movies. We also need those who have resources in this room to put money behind it, but we need it right now because we are no longer just fighting for equality, we are fighting for existence. And the one thing that will remain, not you, but it will be your films, your stories, your poetry. The next generation, they will see that. And hopefully when they see that, they will realize that there was a batch of humans in 2023 that gave a damn and fought for humanity.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure. Yes. Oh no, and that's important. I do not believe that there's just two genders, that there's not female, female. And I also want to leave on that note, Viva Tutagita, our non-binary relative who was killed in Cop City, and we'll get to that. But stop Cop City. Let's make sure that we lift that up. All power to the people. Thank you, Dream.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rev. Janelle, you have done incredible work in your career around DEI and film and entertainment. What have been your top takeaways, and what advice can you give to executives in the audience, listen please, around transforming storytelling in the industry and centering BIPOC voices?
I've got a lot of advice. I've seen a lot of
We
things.
want all of it.
I don't think we have time for that, but I'll give you all the top line notes. And I appreciate the call-in and the reminder of how important Hollywood is. I think it starts there. There's something I think about often when I'm in spaces and meetings with different executives around Hollywood. First is the observation. There's just one of me here. And I'm expected to represent an entire community and communities that I don't even identify as a part of. So the biggest piece of advice is we do not want a seat at the table, a single seat, because that single seat actually divides the community. That's right. And I don't know about y'all, but I am so much stronger when I have the diversity of my community sitting at the table with me.
That's right.
Don't be afraid of being a minority. Don't be afraid of community. Don't be afraid of culture. Don't just try to make money off of culture. But invest in being a part of the communities whose stories are for too long being exploited. That is the biggest piece of advice. It's not a seat at the table. It's about taking your position of power and privilege and bringing it out into the communities to truly understand the stories that need to be championed. That's one of the biggest takeaways. The other, executives, sure, but everyone in this room is shaping and informing the stories that need to be told. Be fearless with that storytelling. Be fearless in even asking and challenging the community that you're a part of to bring another perspective that you can then represent. It's not singular. It's not a single seat at the table that we need. This is so much bigger and so much more urgent. And so for the executives that I sit with, again, where I am just the one, I always ask, can I bring in another seat?
That's right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Favi, at the Center for Cultural Power, you all are working with storytellers of all types, whether it's social media influencers, TV writers, we have a lot in the audience today, culture bearers, visual artists. Why is it important for climate stories to be told from a BIPOC lens, and how are you facilitating those kinds of stories?
Yes, well, it's important because we are the most impacted. Our perspectives, our lived experience, our generational lived experience, because this is not started, the climate crisis is not a new thing. The climate crisis started with colonization. The climate crisis started with stolen land, stolen bodies, and stolen culture. When there was the idea, remember what I said earlier, the idea that certain bodies could be exploited for the consolidation of wealth and power. That happened along this entire hemisphere. And that's when the disruption of ecosystems and the human beings who protected these ecosystems began. And we are now seeing the consequences of that, and we will continue to see that. And so it's critical that we center not just experiences of Black, Indigenous, people of color, because we just don't see those perspectives. And when we even think about, the melting glaciers and So often, I think, especially when we're seeing through the perspective of conservation, which is often white men in heroic positions, we're seeing, whether it's things like Chasing Ice or some of these documentaries, we actually are not seeing the roots of the climate crisis. And we also are not seeing that it's actually going to take a collective solution. It's not a one. And even the film, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, great. Even the film Don't Look Up, which of course broke records and showed us that there's an appetite for this, we did not see sufficient people of color. And so where there is a big gap, there's also a big opportunity. And, taking it back to worldview, right? Our worldview today is that we extract, that we drill, that it's a growth model, right? In this world, we see things as growth. Therefore, it's about we need more energy, we need more consumption, we need more of these systems, and we are going to dominate nature because we have to prioritize the economy, right? Which, of course, we know at the worldwide level is only benefiting a few. That is a worldview. There are other worldviews. Indigenous people who make up 5% of the global population are protecting 80% of our world's biodiversity. And you know why? Is because in many indigenous worldviews, there is a stewardship of nature, there is a protection of nature, not a domination of nature. And so indigenous storytelling is a climate solution because we are being presented a different worldview. That's what we need. We have to move away. And in reality, it's very simple. It's about healing our relationship to the natural world. We don't have to protect the earth. We have to protect ourselves because we are nature. We are connected to all that is alive. And we have to rewire our imaginations because this system has taught us that we are so separate from it. And that is what we see over and over again. And so a different worldview is what's needed. And I think how we do it at the organization is we work with Black, Indigenous, Latine folks who are experiencing this, whether it's folks in the Coachella Valley who are dealing with the Salton Sea, whether it's folks who are dealing with Amazon warehouses, disrupting their local communities, whether it's folks who are fighting against fossil fuel industry in their communities. And I think it's actually, there's so much to be done. The other day I was thinking, I live in the Bay Area, we were experiencing floods, and I'm like, where is the sexy romance story on when you gotta, tell your people have to come over because your places are flooding, right? Because there's water rising. There's so much that we can do.
Their eyes were watching God.
Yes. There you go. And, at the Good Energy Playbook, which is a fabulous tool, tells us that we can integrate through character, through setting, through plot. There is so much that we can do. And I think that when we bring in BIPOC folks, the possibilities are limitless.
Thank you, Fabi. Dream. In your work, you've explored a broad spectrum of social issues and have connected the dots around key injustices from gender justice to climate justice to birth justice. What is the importance of intersectional storytelling in your work?
Yeah, I mean, we don't live single lives, single stories. The reason I lead with I'm from Detroit is because I know that there's a single narrative that all of us have heard about Detroit, that it's a failed Democratic-led city/state. I also live on Martha's Vineyard, right? So when I'm on a Zoom and I say, hey, we do this weird check-in. I'm like, where are you? It's like on Zooms, I'm like, I'm on the internet like everyone else. But when you say when I say I'm in Martha's Vineyard, people go, oh, ooh. No, they say, ooh. And when I say I'm in Detroit, they go, oh, right? Because there's a narrative about Martha's Vineyard. They think that it's rich, they think that it's elite, and they think that it's liberal. There's a narrative about Detroit. They think that it's Black and that it's violent and it's poor, right? And so the way that narrative, even those of us who think that we interrogate narrative, that we shake it up, we are still they're deeply embedded. The Detroit versus everybody, I got so mad when I started seeing Toronto versus everybody. I'm like, when has your city been shit on for generations? Like Raleigh versus everybody. Again, no, not the same narrative, right? Other narratives that we have heard for generations. Reagan, of course, gave us the welfare queen, right? This is a generation, this is a narrative that we've not shaken still, right? I remember when the early days of social media, there was a receipt going around about someone buying crab legs on food stamps, right? Like these narratives about the welfare queen are ones that we have to rise up and deal with every single time. When in criminal justice, we stopped talking about calling people prisoners, right? Because we understood how much that stripped people of their humanity. We see again and again, like things being rolled back, voters' rights being rolled back in places like Florida. Obviously, there's a larger voter suppression campaign, but it's easy to do that because we've had generations of narrative that tell us that people inside prisons aren't human beings, they're not full citizens, they're not worthy of our care and our advocacy, right? I recently made a film called Freshwater. Hip Hop Caucus helped executive produce it. It'll be coming out. It's co-released by NYT OpDocs and PBS's POV. It's a short film. And I'm talking about the flooding in the Midwest because we have framed that as a coastal, problem. And you want to talk about intersectionality, right? Los Angeles, same story. I came home in the second grade one day and my beloved oak tree that was in front of my house and the entire block of trees had been cut down. It was like coming home to the Lorax, right? And they did that for surveillance purposes. We didn't have the budget in Detroit that LAPD has. LAPD literally went on people's roofs in South LA and painted numbers on their rooftops without homeowners' permission. They didn't have to have your permission. It was the LAPD. They moved like the scapo. They went up on the roofs and they painted numbers so that they could have better surveillance from the skies. That decision in the 80s has created flooding. It created flooding this spring. It has created flooding in Detroit all of the time. You know who's great at narrative? The right. There are less than 100 trans students in this country trying to play varsity or junior varsity sports, and they have passed legislation. They've made hay. The GOP has made hay out of political hay, out of children, and they have passed legislation to ban genderqueer children from participating in sports in hundreds of school districts. So partial birth abortion, never happened, right? Another generations long narrative that we are still trying to fight back. Favi talked about chasing ICE and like the single kind of narrative of the white hero. I'm addicted right now to the musical soap opera about patriarchy and patriotism called Yellowstone. And while it attempts to complicate, and I say that because that's the non-chorus, right? Like Taylor Sheridan is doing a piece about white grievances, about menomism. This is a men's rights opera, right? Men's rights opera. But he's complicating it with questions of indigeneity. But we still aren't getting, I don't know who's in the writer's room. He recently had a comment about the WGA strike and this demand that there be like a quota of number of people in the writer's room, and he thinks that he's got it covered. But I assure you he doesn't. I can think of so many times when I've seen a story. I can think of, I know Netflix is one of the sponsors, but I was watching Murder Mountain at the top of the pandemic, and a crime series drama, and I was like, wow, this suffers from not having, as you just said, more than one person in the room, right? They were talking about, this is a crime. Has anyone seen Murder Mountain? It's about Humboldt County. It's about like these murders that have occurred in the north of California. It's about what's happening in the marijuana industry. It's about solving these crimes. Had straight up characters who were absolutely white supremacists, who were like had their own militias, blocking off like access to the police. That wasn't even mentioned in the documentary. I'm like, if there had been some BIPOC people in the room making decisions, they could have complicated that. One of the widows was a 23-year-old who had been in a relationship with her 55-year-old husband who'd just been murdered for 8 to 10 years. There was no woman who had the power in that room to say, well, let's ask him about, his onophilia. which is different than pedophilia. But let's talk to them about, that part. Let's complicate this story. Like, we can do that. Like, we don't have to, like, tell these single stories, these stories that kind of chug along, these hero's journey. I know that we all had to read friggin' Hero's Journey and McKee, and we think that that's it, right? But there are other ways to tell complicated stories, and we see this all the time. We're seeing the choral, we're seeing the ensemble, God bless Robert Altman, but we're seeing this being resurrected, and there are all kinds of ways to bring it. And I know what it's like to be in a writer's room. No one wants to be lectured, no one wants to be told how to tell a story. When Favi says words like systemic, people like nod off. You know what I mean? Because they want a character that's going to give us that, right? And so the indigenous character in Yellowstone, well, there's more than one, but he's responsible for like representing the land, quite frankly, But we don't even get to like the origin story and this question that you're talking about. Like, I can think of ways that if Taylor Sheridan did let one of us into his room, we could help him improve his little soap opera about patriarchy that I'm addicted to, I'm waiting for the next season of 1923 or whatever the fuck, so like.
I want to add something what you just mentioned, which is the attack on trans youth, which is a very successful cultural strategy. So when we talk about culture being powerful, it is our opposition who knows this, right? And I want to say something about a trans excellent example of why culture not only moves faster than politics, but is always going to be beating politics. That is that the first trans actress, black trans actress on TV, 2013, right? Laverne Cox, Orange is the New Black. You began then the visibility of trans voices, Janet Mock. We had shows like Pose. We had more trans folks on TV, Disclosure, right? Visibility, because visibility transforms culture. Then, last year, the New York Times did they tracked how many young people are identifying as non-binary. Record-breaking. Never before have so many young people identified as non-binary. That is the power of culture. It's been 10 years of major trans visibility where now we use pronouns. A lot of young people are identifying. This is why the right, because we are in a time of culture war, y'all, the right is pushing back on the political front, but culture has already moved forward. They are going to continue. This is their presidential strategy, is to go after trans kids and border stuff and CRT, critical race theory. Again, a cultural issue. So culture is extremely powerful. It is how we organize societies. It's how we get folks out to vote and mobilize. And on climate, we've as an industry, we've been looking at race and gender, and of course we have a long way to go, but climate is a little teeny, tiny. And we have to understand that is putting us on a losing track. And so when we talk about intersectionality, imagine climate trans stories with Latine, Black, Indigenous characters. That is the future, and that is the future I want to invite you all to talk about, because that is how we are going to influence the political systems.
And don't be intimidated when Barry Weiss writes an article about how woke you're being in Hollywood, right? Because the struggle is Sisyphean. This is a Sisyphean struggle. The backlash is real. And I mean, and by the way, you don't have to check out off all those boxes. In the Orange is the New Black, why haven't you embedded a story about what it takes to get clean water, if that's even a goal, into these isolated areas, these high desert California? Like that is a climate story, right? It's one of the ways that Favi and I were trained by Movement Generation. We were working in all these other places. I was working mostly in criminal justice. Favi was doing her work as an artist, as an activist, and we were invited to look at ways that in our own work we could always complicate and bring climate into the questions that we were asking about our existing work. So, and by the way, these are ripped from the headline stories. I mean, Rev is from Louisiana. We know what was happening during Katrina. We know what happened during Sandy. We know what happens when people are in prisons and these storms, these superstorms, which are going to continue to come, hit those areas, and how they are often left behind, sometimes to die, right? So anyway, these are stories that can already be embedded to like existing narratives. And yeah.
Thank you.
Oh my God. I love that you brought woken, right? Since when is it a crime to be awake, to be alive, to experience life? Like that is actually one of my biggest pain points when the attack on being more inclusive in this industry is attacked as being too woke. Like, I'm sorry. I don't know if y'all know this, but one of the initiatives that I'm most proud of that I've been able to support at the Academy is the introduction of inclusion standards for Best Picture consideration.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So important.
And the Academy, we're not out here making films, but we have this beautiful statue called the Oscar that everyone wants, right?
An anti-labor trick.
Right? This golden statue. And it's an opportunity to put pressure on the systems that lead to the statue that's needed. The inclusion standards are designed to attack systems, not control stories, not control narratives. It's not too woke. It's calling out the inequities of systems that this whole industry has been built on.
That's right.
And it's challenging all of us in all aspects of this industry, whether it's on-screen representation, behind the camera representation, creative department leadership representation, how you're pouring into the future of this industry, who are your creative execs, your development execs, your marketing execs, who's putting that story out into the world. It's putting pressure on all of that because that entire system is manipulating what stories get seen, how they get seen, and why they're being seen. So the Academy is putting pressure on those systems. And we're also being challenged of being too woke. But y'all, the Academy is made up of 10,000 members globally who all contribute to this industry. So is the industry too woke? Or is this just a beautiful awakening and necessary realization that art and the art of filmmaking thrives from diversity? And it's time for us to do the work to preserve the art.
Yes.
I'm thinking about power, and we have the writer strike right now, right? These are labor movements. These badass writers have been on the ground for what, 8 weeks now, out of work every single day, marching outside in the sun, fighting for something, and these same systems that are affecting Hollywood affect the planet. So how do we organize ourselves to build power, not just the power on screen, but off screen? And how do we shift the power dynamic to allow more creators from underrepresented communities to have access? Like, what is the how?
Yeah, so I think, one, Hip Hop Caucus stands with the writers. We are in solidarity with you. The how is actually that we're at this point, but we have to know that we can't win as a siloed, segregated, progressive movement. Yeah. We have to break the silos down. And so because when you're out there, and we're out there now together with you, other folks don't know that. And to what Fofavi and Dream was saying, I'm listening because the right also understands how to unify their evil together. That's right. I will go out there to the trans rally, and then literally, when I'm in Washington, D.C., they will leave, and then the Move for Black Lives rally will come behind them. They will leave, and then the anti-war folks will show up. And then they will leave, and then the climate activists will show up. It'll change shades. And then folks fighting for student debt, and then immigration. And then as I'm sitting, I could sit in the park and be at 7 rallies, and everybody comes with their speakers, and they're going, they're very passionate, and do their talks. And literally on the other side, as we're fighting to make our intersection good, on the other side, the right or whoever is fighting against those things is in a situation where they all somehow go behind the closed doors and they all come out together to fight the evil, and they put it into policy and legislation and litigation. And so I think that the first step for us is that we have to show solidarity. That's one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier about Cop City, and I hope you will join in that. As that, to me, Cop City is our environmental issue of the 2023. It's the issue that we have to focus on. And it's the issue that's important because it's an issue that, to be honest, is in a black city with a Democrat and a black mayor. And it's a situation that we have to choose sides, that either we're going to be either Democrat or Republican, or we're going to be human. I choose humanity. And so I think that stopping cops, so you can go to hiphopcaucus.org. We have an event today. And I really want that to come together because we have to organize. But the key thing here is this. Resources are also important in how we do this fight, how we actually show we love one another in this battle. I wear a funder's hat as well. I work for a number of foundations. Some are on the screen behind me. It's all nice. It's all good in that regard. But the reality is this, is that in this climate space, the New School did a study in which one of the foundations that I work with now and 11 others gave out $1.3 billion a year annually to fight the climate crisis. Sounds like a lot of money, and it is. It's $1.3 billion every single year. And what we're talking about now in the stage is how we get a lot of that money to go into creating culture and creating films. And so this is why this is a very important conversation. But out of that 1.3 billion that was given, only 1.3% went to environmental justice and BIPOC-led organizations.
Yeah.
So on one hand, as we're talking about, we had this Justice 40, which means within 40% to be going to the investment toward vulnerable communities within the movement and within the industry, and within these walls, only 1% is really going to our communities. So we got to fix some things in that regard. And if we can have the solidarity, break down the silos, and also have a real conversation about resources and infrastructure, then I'm telling you, if not, let's get used to wearing gas masks. Let's get used to wildfires. Let's get used to droughts. Let's get used to hurricanes. Let's really discuss not climate justice, but climate adaptation. Let's change the conversation, because if we, again, do not get serious about this, not only will we suffer, but the folks coming behind us will curse us with everything they got.
That's
because
right.
we as humans did nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, we could barely handle face masks in a pandemic, and you brought in gas masks. Like,
Facts.
it's real.
And that's why, and Dream told me earlier, I'm here, and I'm so glad we work with Dream and Favi. Favi just energetic. I just love Favi. And so, and meeting new friends and folks we're gonna be partners with. Yo, this is not a game, y'all.
Yeah.
Like, for real, we gotta somehow use our gifts and our skills. And I know we got a lot of ego. I know folks got a lot of, they really important, and they did this, and they did that, and all these. I know that's part of the industry to show your thing. Yo, we are in a crisis.
Yes.
We are in a crisis for humanity. And we're in a crisis that we can actually solve. There is still time. I'm not talking about when folks are lying to us about certain things and we can't solve. We literally have time. But time is running out.
It is.
And it's very important for us, from things here in LA, as far as stop the drilling. Shout out to the LA Council who actually stopped the drilling, banned the drilling here in LA, and other folks who are all around the country who are doing amazing work in New York, who are stopping folks from using their pensions. The divestment processes have been going amazing. We have young folks. We have such amazing Black and Indigenous women who are on the front lines in Lake Charles and just all around the Gulf South. We have, I'm telling you, they are laying it down. There are folks who are in the continent. There are folks who are in the global South. There are folks who are throwing down. There are also folks who are being killed, like Berta Caceres in Honduras, Tortuguita in Atlanta, because they laying it down. And there are folks who are doing it intentionally. And so if you don't tell those stories, And I don't, we can get on to all kind of stories. I don't care how you tell the story. I just need you to tell the story. Please, I heard this week too about being preachy or it's political. Yo, that's not the issue at all. You have to tell the story. And you got to tell the story now or time runs out.
I'm honored to be working with Rev and Hip Hop Caucus. I do care how you tell the stories. I think that, to Rev's point about resources, like bring in Detroit at the Allied Media Conference, a wonderful progressive conference that's all about media and framing and narrative and living in the future. One of the principles is that wherever there's a problem, there are already people on the ground working on the problem. So just know that. Bring the, with police procedurals, with Homeland, you're bringing in the LAPD, the NYPD, you're bringing in Marines, you're bringing in people from DOD to be story consultants, right? Like these are, as Favi said, these are people with the expertise of lived experience. Like they should be getting like paid to come into writers' rooms and to diversify like the storytelling process in a real and meaningful way. I know that we were talking, Janelle was talking about don't be afraid of the word woke. I'm old enough to remember when the right bullied white people out of calling themselves liberals, right? Like, and now like progressive is about to be a bad word. Like it's amazing to watch, folks cower. And I understand why, because as Rev said, there's a unified, very moneyed, right now with another group of people I work with, Moms Rising, we are pushing back against Moms for Liberty. And guess what? We're doing like 18 months too late. Books have been banned, laws have been passed, school boards have been taken over, right? So we're often, I would add to, Rev's call of urgency, we're often late. Like the time to do these things is as soon as the writer's strike is over, right? Again, shout out to Mary Pickford, Charlie Chaplin, and Douglas Fairbanks, who started United Artists, who made this coast like even have organized labor. This is what began our unions. I wasn't joking when I said, and then the Academy came along and said, hey, let me distract you from all that organized labor. Here's an award show. When Rev was saying that this is a company, obviously an industry that has been taken over by the oil company, he's actually talking about mid-century, and all of us who've read Peter Biskin and know about like when the oil companies came and took over our cinema and our major studios, we all know when that happened. And by the way, it's not random or like, we should be looking backwards. We have to look backwards to think about how we're moving forward, because someone is producing really quality commercials for people like BP and the plastics industry. That's right. Not accusing anyone in this room of doing it, but somebody has been producing really good, like, commercials for them. I don't know what the pink washing or the whitewashing, like what the equivalent would be in the oil and fossil fuel world would be. Greenwashing, but that has been happening.
Oh yeah.
And so these are all of the things that we are constantly having to fight back against, like narrative, that there's good fossil fuel, that there are good plastics, that we're going to have better plastics, and so yeah, we are like on the front lines in the storytelling world. Everyone in this room is, right? And then those of us who live on the front lines in places like Detroit, where we've been fighting, we have water warriors in Detroit. Of course, we have Flint, where there's been a fight for clean water, but I live in a city, Detroit, where for 3 years, 5,000 people were having their water shut off a week. That was connected to other questions around real estate speculation. It wasn't connected to the $80 tax bills that people owed, And so these are all fights that can, come into writers' rooms, narratives that need to be told. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dream. And, I'll close this out by saying how we build power is that, number one, we have to understand we, as culture creators, we have a lot of power. That's the first there's a narrative in this industry that frames power in a certain way, but we have people power. And when we unite that with earth power, we can take on this problem. And so I think, first of all, to stand in our power and to organize with each other. There's also this myth that artists were just here to create. You know what organizing looks like? Is gathering people together, looking at tools. How are we telling these climate stories? Creating work groups, creating associations, working with your unions to create climate initiatives, including BIPOC people in the leadership of these climate initiatives, but really to organize, right? And not just our cultural output, but how we transform the industries that we work in. And as Rev says, this is called infrastructure building, right? In order for us to topple the old infrastructures, we need a plan to create the next generation of infrastructures. And that means, you know, indigenous creators, trans creators, disabled creators, how are we supporting them in telling climate stories, right? How are we unifying? And the final thing I'll say is that the tools now exist, okay, y'all? The Good Energy Playbook is a comprehensive tool that exists, but we need to put those tools to action now, right? And, you know, I'm on a lot of climate panels. I can't tell you how many times we actually can't find a showrunner who's telling BIPOC climate stories, right? It's actually, it's extremely hard right now. And, you know, extrapolations, yes, breaking new ground. We have a long way to go. The field right now is barren. That is a huge opportunity. That's a huge opportunity. So y'all who have climate story ideas, I can assure you there's going to be a moment when that is going to be popping, but work on your climate stories now. Try to figure out, because at this point, we need just to throw a lot of seeds for the garden to flourish so that over the next few years, you know, Rev said, as you said, how much time do we have? I'm going to tell you how much time we have. The IPCC, the international body on climate, in July, we will hit less than 6 years to dramatically alter the course of global warming before we start getting into very dangerous temperature levels. So we have about 6 years to dramatically alter the systems, because after that we get into the danger zone, which is over 2%, right? Rev, is the 2% mark?
Over 1.5.
Well, 1.5, sorry, 1.5.
2%, then we over the top.
Yeah,
then.
we're dead.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
2.5. So just want to, so last thing is, y'all get engaged in the climate movement. There is young people, there is all kinds, Youth for the Apocalypse, Sunrise Movement. There is so many climate movements, and I want to see our beautiful black and brown people out there, right? We need to really just show up in the same way we show up for other movements, but, you know, just organize with frontline organizations,
Bobby,
and join a climate movement.
Bobby,
Yes.
can I just add one last thing?
Yes, do it.
Just wanted to say to y'all, you don't got to wait at all. You can start today at the Hip Hop Caucus. We have a short window in the Stop Cop City. Our office is downtown LA at 4 p.m. If you just go to hiphopcaucus.org, get all the information. But at 4 p.m. at Hip Hop Caucus office, we're just doing a photo shoot where we can network. And we want to just have you come there and network to find out how we can use your skills and your gifts to help us protect the wilderness forest in Atlanta, because every victory counts. Every single victory counts.
That's right.
I need you, and if nobody told you this today, know that Rev loves you. All power to the people.
Rev loves you. Hip Hop Caucus will also be at Earth Sessions tomorrow, so please register for that on our website. And thank you all so much. I hope you're as inspired as I am.
I'm here to spill the beans on the big C. Fellas don't think it's real. Us ladies can't even talk about it. And for everyone in between and whatnot, forget about it. We can't even admit we have a big C. But lucky for you, I'm here to help. I know everything that has to do with the big climate crisis. The climate crisis is a result of a highly abundant resource that is constantly extracted. Most people think that this resource is fossil fuels. In reality, it's not. This resource is people. Climate change is something that we'll have to weather together. We have to reclaim our labor in all of its diverse forms that celebrate our different bodies, cultures, and ways of living on planet Earth. It's not about going back. It's about remembering our way forward. It's about working together to solve the big C.